Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, How to Move Your State and Local Government from Ground to Cloud. My name is Petra Miller, Marketing Manager here at AK Enterprise Solutions, and I'll be moderating the presentation. Before we get started, I wanted to run through a couple of housekeeping notes. To optimize the viewing quality of the presentation, please close any programs you have running besides GoToWebinar. Use one monitor for the webinar. If you are dialed in through your phone, you will need to unmute your speakers on your computer during the video portion of today's presentation. If you experience any visual or audio issues, please contact GoTo directly at support.logmeinc.com/GoToWebinar/contact us. If you have any issues though, please don't worry. This webinar is being recorded and we will send you the recording in the next few business days. Also, I just wanted to point out the questions panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Using this functionality, you may submit questions at any time during the presentation. We will address as many as possible during the Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. If we don't get to your question, we will follow up after the presentation. Today's session will be presented by Alan Kahn, CEO at AK Enterprise Solutions, and Greg Inks, Cloud Practice Lead at AK Enterprise Solutions. Alan focuses on growing the company by developing long-term relationships with clients and partners. Greg is a cloud technology expert committed to the development and growth of AK's cloud practice and technology direction. In terms of what we'll cover today, we'll start by sharing a video testimonial from McHenry County, Illinois. Then we'll go into why no two clouds are created equal. Next, we'll cover what is Azure and what is the Azure Government Cloud. Then we'll dig into security and compliance. Next, we'll share a few more case studies of the Azure Cloud in action. And then we'll conclude with next steps, then questions and answers. Now I'd like to hand it over to Alan to speak about McHenry County, Illinois. Alan?
Thanks so much, Petra. This is Alan Kahn, co-CEO at AK Enterprise Solutions. And I'm going to talk just for a second about McHenry, but not too much since there's a great video that we're about to show. But before I kick that off, I just want to say that AKA is a cloud consultancy focusing on digital transformation for our clients, leveraging Microsoft technologies. And those Microsoft technologies may fall into two sort of categories: business applications, which are represented by the D365 solution, and that has some different components to it, and then sort of Azure and the rest of the cloud. So for this presentation, I'm going to be a little bit more focused on the D365 pieces, and Greg Inks is going to be a little bit more focused on the rest of the Azure components. So the McHenry County story is a D365 finance and operations story. Finance and operations is what we traditionally refer to as ERP. And so we're doing projects that replace financial systems, procurement systems, budgeting systems, etc. And McHenry County is a recent win and project which is underway but not live yet. But they were so excited about their move to the cloud that they wanted to get on video and kind of record some of their enthusiasm. So we were happy to accommodate. And if Petra, if you can go ahead and advance this to the video, that would be fantastic.
Great. Thank you so much, Alan. A couple of notes before we play the video. Again, use one monitor for the webinar. If you're dialed in through your phone, you will need to unmute your computer speakers at this time. The sound of the video will play through your computer, not through the phone. Lastly, please be sure to select window mode, the square below your microphone in the control panel, as sometimes full screen, if you have this playing full screen, will not display the video portion. And with that, let's play the video.
There's always something new, and you have to challenge yourself to be open to trying something new. The residents we serve, they have a lot more experience with technology now, and there's an expectation that their government is going to keep pace.
Everything shows that the industry are going to the cloud very rapidly, and we decided it was time for McHenry County to do the same thing. Dynamics 365 had an excellent cloud-based solution, and it just made a lot of sense.
We have about 1,200 employees and 28 offices and departments that are serving the 308,000 residents.
The Sheriff's Department, Planning and Development, our own county nursing home, the Division of Transportation. We are a very complex organization, and AKA understands that.
IT organizations struggle with providing the functionality that people expect today. And the only way to do that is through leveraging cloud applications.
One of the top benefits of moving to the cloud is accessibility for our users. The cloud itself can be accessed by an iPad, by a desktop computer, by an iPhone. We have remote access capabilities for management, giving the users lots of flexibility.
Protecting our data is the biggest thing we do. That's what we are. We're stewards of information. And Microsoft's cloud is more secure than we as a county could ever be.
It's no small endeavor to make the decision to look at a new ERP system.
It was important for us to pick a consultant organization who had familiarity with county governments, who understood the product they were selling, and could help us deliver that throughout the county.
We're recognizing now that this is where the future is going to be, and it was comfortable to move with a company like AKA and Microsoft to help our policymakers service our residents better.
All right, let's jump right back into the presentation. Now we'd like to hand it off to Greg Inks, Cloud Practice Lead at AKA Enterprise Solutions, to speak about the cloud.
Thank you very much, Petra. Good morning to everybody that has joined us. I'd like to first start off talking to you a little bit about why no two clouds are created equal. One of the first kind of key decisions that you start to make as you move into the cloud is which type of cloud technology, which provider do you want to take advantage of, and what makes the most sense for your particular situation. When we talk about why no two clouds are the same, there are a number of key questions that you need to ask yourselves and your internal teams to help understand what would be the right option for you. As an example, does your provider help you meet your compliance needs? Most cloud service providers should be able to prove that they not only understand the complex compliance standards that are out there, but help you ensure that you're meeting them, and also be able to help you prove to your constituents or regulators that you have in fact met those compliance standards. Or as another example, if you take a look at from an IRS point of view, the IRS tax and security guidelines really are focused around special data storage and confidentiality. And do we have the specific requirements defined and met to meet those types of confidentiality requirements? Does your data residency have something that you need to be aware of? In other words, are you dealing with data for people within your municipalities that have data that has specific requirements, either federal, state, or local, around where that data can reside, especially when it comes to things that involve other states or, quite frankly, leaving the United States soil? Where does that data flow? Where does that data store? And can you ensure and guarantee that you're meeting those types of requirements? One thing is, don't overlook your document retention and your e-discovery requirements. Many agencies have very strong requirements about maintaining a data trail along with audit and access regulations for a significant period of time. And does your cloud provider provide that not only for your data, but access to cloud systems or infrastructure and application landscapes that you have hosted in that cloud provider? Finding a cloud provider with a record of really paying attention to security, addressing it in a timely manner, being able to meet security requirements is really key and paramount for today's modern age. Cybersecurity threats continue to expand. They continue to grow at an exponential rate, and really looking for a cloud provider that is on the forefront of protecting you from a cybersecurity standpoint and investing heavily into that prevention and protection really does make a significant difference when you're trying to thwart simple things like denial of service attacks all the way through and including obtaining personal data or records of data that it should never make it into the public forum. Last but not least, accessibility and Section 508 type of compliance is really something that most agencies have very strong concerns around. Is your cloud provider or your hosting provider committed to accessibility? Are they helping government agencies meet their obligations? Are they looking specifically at the Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act? And can they guarantee that the tools and the technology that they're providing will either help support your adherence to these regulations or even help you solve for problems that you may have existing in the past? So why is Azure the right choice for state and local governments? There's quite a few questions that kind of flow around this, but before I kind of get into why Azure is the right fit, I wanted to describe and kind of articulate what Azure is. There's a lot of misnomers or confusion out there, at least in terms of what is the cloud. Said in a more joking way, Azure does have a definition. There is a name behind Azure. I found this kind of interesting as I was explaining to my children the other day what it was that I did for a living. And they said, so you work with the color blue? No, I don't, but that is definitely a definition for Azure. I'm not entirely sure why they picked the name, why Microsoft picked it, other than it's one of the color palettes inside of the company branding. But from a practical standpoint, what Azure really is a collection of cloud services. It's involved in a number of capabilities ranging anywhere from software as a service, platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service. And don't worry if you're not familiar with those terms. We'll kind of go into a little bit of detail here in the coming slides about what that means. But think of it this way. It can range at its most basic format of hosting servers and desktops for you in a data center hosted and run and maintained by Microsoft, all the way through to including services that run in a very serverless compute kind of fashion, where you have an application that really doesn't know anything about what type of server it's running on, or quite frankly, what location it's running on, and it just processes as it's needed on demand. With Azure, you get the freedom to build and deploy whatever you need for your agency. If it's just closing down some servers because you don't really need them anymore, but you can't afford to turn them offline, you can put those into Azure through a backup and high availability plan. Load those servers into Azure and turn them off, where you only pay for the storage of the data, but the servers are basically offline, not costing you a penny. All the way through to including full public-facing internet websites with prevention for denial of service attacks and cybersecurity in place to help you weather the storm of when a bad actor decides that they want to start seeing what kind of vulnerabilities you may have in place. So from a location point of view, Azure is one of the, if not the largest networks of cloud systems that exist between all of the cloud providers. You'll always get a number of different data points between some of the big cloud providers on how many locations they're in, but suffice it to say, from a geographic reach perspective, Azure is operating in almost all of the countries and continents where most of the agencies have done some form of level of business. Obviously, if you zero in on the United States, we have full coverage from a region map perspective that covers off on all of the states and counties within the United States government. But if you start to expand that into Europe or Asia, there's quite a large footprint of countries there. At its core, Azure is a global infrastructure of more than 40 Azure resources. They're lighting up, Azure regions. They're lighting up more regions and more data centers almost on a monthly basis. And this slide is probably already out of date, even though it's a fairly recent update. They have the largest footprint of any cloud provider, which should be at last count close to 2 times larger than that of, say, an Amazon Web Services. So really the reach for where can you load applications and host things in the cloud can span to meet all of your needs. So what is IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS? Those are acronyms that you probably have heard a lot about in tech journals or even in the media. But at its heart, these are 3 different types of technologies that you can leverage when you're moving things into the cloud. First is infrastructure as a service, or IaaS. The easiest way to think of infrastructure as a service is it's really virtualized hardware. It's VMs or virtual machines, if you're familiar with that term, that are available for you to assemble to make up any application or any business system and snap them into place. In IaaS, you are responsible, you or your provider, are responsible for creating your system in the cloud. You're responsible for creating network topography, for defining firewall rules, for creating virtual machines, selecting the type of operating systems that you want to have in place, and really you're building it from scratch. The analogy I like to use for this is think of the movie from a number of years ago called Field of Dreams, where really it's a field that has been plowed and leveled. It's got everything ready for you to come and build whatever type of sporting event you want. So pretend you're looking to build a baseball field. The field owner is the one that has supplied all of the equipment. They've given you the field, they've given you the plow, they have the bases, they have the stands, they have various types of benches. You just go in and you choose all of the different pieces that you want to make up your baseball field. You're responsible for the construction and the layouts, but the provider, the cloud hoster, is the one that has all of the technology ready for you to go do. The next is platform as a service. Platform as a service builds on top of infrastructure as a service, in that when you talk about platform as a service, they take away the need for you to go do the build, quote unquote. In other words, common application services are already there and available for you to take advantage of. So in a lot of modern day applications, you have some form of an identity management scenario where you need to handle usernames and passwords, authorization and authentication. In days past, you would have to look for a product, you'd have to buy that product and load it into a virtual machine and use it with your applications, maintaining all of that infrastructure for identity management. With platform as a service, Azure Active Directory as an example, that is a platform as a service software product that's available for you to use, where you don't have to worry about the infrastructure or standing it up or really building anything. You simply say, I'll have one of this type of flavor. The spikes in size and traffic are handled for you in platform as a service. So if you have a website that you're hosting and you think that there's going to be a special event coming near, I don't know, say a voting day or a voter registration opportunity, and you're worried that your website isn't going to scale to meet the demand of traffic, or even worse, a bad actor decides to throw a denial of service attack at you. Platform as a service is going to take away the responsibility from you of having to scale up or scale down your environment and help prevent you from experiencing any sort of outage because of that spike in traffic. It auto scales or auto heals to meet the demands of the transactions and the security constraints that are coming up as the time happens. From the same sort of analogy, if you think about platform as a service, it's almost as though you've decided that you want to play baseball, but you don't want to have to go and build a baseball diamond and load up all the infrastructure. You simply grab your team and you walk up to the nearest baseball field. You say, yep, I like this one. This is the one I want to play ball at. You get on the bases and you go have some fun. There's nothing for you to set up, nothing for you to tear down. You just go and play. Software as a service is a step even further. And this is where not only is the infrastructure taken care of for you, but so is the application. So it's a full end-to-end solution for a specific business scenario. Dynamics CRM is an example of that, where the software, the hardware, all of the infrastructure, all of the setup and tear down is all handled as a software product on your behalf, where it's simply a matter of deciding that this is what you want, and through a certain degree of partner activities and Microsoft activities, you can go from zero to having an environment in a very short amount of time. There's really no hardware or software to manage. You don't have to worry about patching the operating system or patching the software. Microsoft is going to take care of that for you, or your software provider, if it's non-Microsoft technology, would take care of that for you. The simplest analogy to think of in this scenario is you want to play baseball, but you really don't want to leave the comfort of your couch. You don't really have enough friends to field a baseball team, but you can't get rid of the itch. So it's like playing a video game. You just simply decide, I'm going to play this. You can pause the game whenever you want to. You can turn it on and off, save your status, all that kind of good stuff. But it's sort of that pre-built artificial world for you of being able to play baseball without having to do a lot of the heavy lifting. So there's also another kind of thought process that a lot of agencies are having around is, well, there's Azure, but I hear there's multiple flavors of Azure. What's the difference between what a normal commercial entity can access versus what a government entity can access? And that's where we get into this sort of this debate of commercial cloud versus government cloud. One of the first things to understand about the commercial cloud is that it's often focused on internet-based business in the commercial cloud. It was designed for hosting websites. It was designed for internet scale traffic. It was meant for companies that were hosting their website, maybe an e-commerce type of solution, and wanted to be able to get that in the way where They didn't have to have the large investment in infrastructure or IT personnel to run a website. On the government cloud, it's typically focused for private intranet usages or agency uses. In other words, there's really no major advantage from a government entity hosting a public-facing website on the Azure Government Cloud. On the other hand, if it's intra-dependent type of activity between agencies or inside of government operations, to obtain the same level of government clearance and government regulation, the GovCloud is a perfect example of where you would host an intranet-based website. Commercial clouds tend to allow multi-tenancy with many customers from many industries. So you could have a website that was an e-commerce platform sitting right alongside your direct competitor in the same Azure environment. You can't necessarily see one another. You're not going to be able to access their data and they can't access yours, but it's a shared set of hardware and racks in a public forum where there's a lot of multi-tenancy to make up the usage of that environment. Whereas in government cloud, it does allow multi-tenancy, but it's only with government customers. So a commercial company cannot deploy something into Azure Government. It is only government agencies, ranging anywhere from local municipalities all the way up to the federal government. It's restricted to that. Even partners and consultancies such as us can't access anything in the cloud unless it's on behalf of a government agency. Data storage in the commercial cloud is controllable, but it can be located in other locations. So a commercial entity could start off by storing data inside of a central region data center inside of Azure and then decide that they're going to move that to Europe. I'm not entirely sure of a good business use case for why that would occur, but they could move that data. But also on the flip side, they could have scenarios where they're a multi-tenanted company and they have offices in Chicago and offices in, say, France, and they want to be able to span both countries within the same Azure backbone, if you will, and share data between the two. That's really what the commercial cloud was intended for. In the government cloud, data storage is still controllable. You can choose the region that is closest to you for the best latency, best performance, and all that, but it's only located in the specific region or country of our choice. So if you're in the US, if you're using the US government cloud, it stays in the US. That data cannot be shared across over into Europe because that would break sovereignty rules. So you have that ability to feel very comfortable that your data is staying on soil. Security and compliance is in the commercial cloud very much focused on individuals, the end user, protecting the general public that's sitting on the public internet, interacting with your product. In the commercial cloud, it's always focused very much on accreditation and clearance and regulation, country protection, isolated data sources. In other words, in the government cloud, it is assumed no access unless explicitly granted. When we talk about, finally, for commercial cloud, all of the Azure services are available across the board. This is where Microsoft does all of its development. Everything that they do for all of the products is now cloud first. They start in the commercial cloud, and then they create versions for on-premise deployment or commercial deployment. So it's really focused on trying to get the best product out as fast as they can and handle the internet scale problem. In the government cloud, however, almost everything's available, but not quite. Some products just don't make sense for a government agency. There are certain services that are available from Microsoft in the commercial cloud that really just don't translate well to that state and local government type of feel. So why do I keep harping on the Azure Government Cloud? Because it's something that you really need to consider. When we talk about government exclusivity, this is really what this is focused on. It is just for government agencies, from the federal all the way down to tribal level governments. Only they and the partners have access to it. There is no way for any commercial entity to access data in the government cloud. The government cloud has the broadest amount of compliance. We'll talk about that here in a few slides. The number of certifications and compliance offerings that Microsoft is keeping up to date to ensure across the board compliance with government regulation is some of the highest and most stringent available. As a matter of fact, I believe at the last statistic that I saw, the Azure Government Cloud is always under some form of compliance review, continually, 365 days a year, where there is some form of an audit and some form of a regulatory review always occurring. and making sure that everything is up to snuff on a consistent basis. Hybrid flexibility. When we talk about the cloud and the government cloud in particular, sometimes agencies have a hybrid scenario where they can't let certain data go to the cloud. There is no reason why, and one of the strengths of using Azure and the Azure Government Cloud is that you can have hybrid scenarios where your data stays on-premise and maybe your compute goes up into the cloud. Or flip it around, maybe there is certain data that is very much a scalable data that you want to have up in the cloud, but there's certain scenarios where you're just trying to test things and look at it and you want to be able to pull back down. That hybrid interaction, that hybrid data center scenario is something that Azure really specializes in making it feel very seamless to IT departments that are looking to do that sort of combination of on-prem and the cloud. Last but not least, the Azure Government Cloud is level 5 DoD approved, which means that there are 6 government-only data centers that have this particular type of clearance. It is not necessarily, ooh, I want to have that because I need that to feel comfortable, but for certain agencies where they have a special DoD type of relationship and applications that are being hosted for the DoD, this becomes critical in being able to host their software and their applications in the cloud in a secure way where the Department of Defense will abide by and follow and trust that they've done things the right way. So for the Microsoft Cloud, really, when you think about it, Azure Government is a set of secure and compliant cloud services for the U.S. government only and all government agencies that exist for the country. It's only operated by individuals in both Microsoft data centers as well as providers that have been approved. If you're talking about the actual people in the data center, they're even U.S. screened individuals. It has to follow all of the same statutes and regulations for employment. It's physically separated. Your instance in the Gov Cloud is separate from that of the commercial cloud, and it's entirely different sets of infrastructure. The other thing that I'll kind of make mention is the amount of commitment that Microsoft is making for standing this up is absolutely incredible, for their commitment to security, privacy, and control. Microsoft has defended repeatedly in both state and federal courts privacy constraints, both for individuals as well as agencies, on audit and subpoena where they've felt, and the law says that type of subpoena or request for access is not something that they have to provide. Microsoft fights it to the T and really tries to look out and defend as much as they can for the people that are using their cloud. So all 50 states are already Microsoft Government Cloud users, believe it or not. I thought this statistic was very interesting. I had not realized that every single state has some form of adoption of the Microsoft Cloud, which is a fantastic number if you think about it. That's really more than 7,000 different agencies have some degree or some footprint in Microsoft, whether that's as simple as an Office 365 subscription, an email address, or maybe something as simple as a dashboard running in a Power BI online module. There is a tremendous amount of support and growth for customers that are already interacting with and using Microsoft Cloud services. And then to kind of give you a little bit of a flavor of where is the Azure government resources and where are they deployed to from a regions and connectivity perspective, this graphic, I will tell you, is likely already out of date. Again, they're adding regions and data centers all the time, but this gives you a rough idea of the type of government data centers that are out there for you. So the items that are circled with the blue cloud are really just what we call our standard government regions. These are regions where it has most of the standard government services, not some of the higher end compliance and regulatory requirements, but for the entry point of all government agencies that have a government requirement for that type of isolation. The next is the one that's in orange. That covers off on your government and DoD regions. This is where it's the same government regulation plus the additional compliance requirements associated from a DoD. I won't drain this, but you can kind of get an idea of where everything's located. And for those counties and or state agencies that are trying to leverage the cloud where you don't have a blue circle or one of these circles in your area, don't worry. That doesn't mean that you're out of luck and can't use it. There is a number of types of technology that your internet service providers can supply that will give you direct access using technologies like VPN, virtual private network, or express routes to get a fiber-based connection to the Azure backbone. So even if you don't have direct proximity to one of these regions, you can get very high fidelity access into Azure through your internet service provider. So from a security and compliance perspective, this is probably one of the hottest topics that I get into with my state and local government customers on a very regular basis. You know, what does Azure have? Right here is a simple graphic that is out of date that shows you all of the compliance and regulations that exist out there. Now, why did I say it's out of date? Because Microsoft is adding more and more every single day. They have a dedicated set of centers and websites available for you online called the Azure Security and Compliance Center, where you can go into that either yourself or have your partner do and look up any type of regulation, any type of compliance certification or accreditation that you're trying to find and get the latest and greatest of what Azure is currently certified for the region or data center that you're looking at. And in some cases, even get copies of the audit reports. So if SOC compliance is something that was very concerning for you and you wanted to find out what type of SOC audit results has Microsoft had, you can go into the Compliance Center and actually get access to the audit results for SOC compliance. But if we look specifically at the government area and kind of zoom into that, you can see here that there's just a tremendous amount of concern and direct involvement from Microsoft in making sure that they've got the broadest coverage of government compliances available to you. Again, some of those would be ranging anywhere from IRS types of compliance through the Justice Department or all the way to DoD. So you really can get a sense of how invested Microsoft is in being the most trusted and compliant cloud available. And just to kind of drive that point home a little bit more, from if you were to look at the criminal justice type of compliance directly, there's more than 26 states that are already in some form either having a requirement for or demonstrating compliance with the criminal justice information security regulations, which is really more than 2/3 of the population if you really think about it from the footprint in terms of size and scope. FedRAMP, which is obviously near and dear to many agencies and many state government officials. FedRAMP is something that Microsoft takes very, very to heart and looks to make sure that they're keeping track of and staying current with FedRAMP as much as they can and abide by and follow any of the new regulations that come out. So when we talk about compliance steps, Microsoft is also very focused on looking at compliance as it relates to each one of their individual services. So they're not just saying, well, we're going to be the most compliant when it comes to just our data center. They actually take that compliance even more seriously down to the individual service level. So if there was a particular type of technology that your agency was looking for taking advantage of, say like Microsoft Key Vault for security and identity management, you could go into Key Vault in particular and say, does that particular service meet my needs? Can I use it in the commercial cloud, and will it still cover the government regulations? Many agencies have been able to find, by going through this sort of matrix of the services that they want to leverage and what data centers are available to it and what compliance regulations that they need, have been able to isolate and determine, you know, the commercial cloud actually meets the regulatory requirements without having to go into the government cloud. Why is that important? Because again, there's always the cost profile that you need to look at. There's whether or not you have some of those cross-sharing types of technologies, and really paying attention to which cloud makes the most sense for you, your price, your ability to keep the costs under control and contained. Really comes down to which compliance you're trying to meet. And the government cloud is one of the most comprehensive clouds for anybody who's got some form of a DoD mission. Even if it's just a periphery touch point and you're not necessarily doing something directly for the DoD, it's good to know that if you have that type of an integration or that type of a relationship with the Department of Defense, that you can make that happen with the government cloud. So with that, we wanted to kind of talk a little bit more about the Azure Government Cloud in action. We have a couple of additional case studies around the Dynamics practice that we'd like to share with you. So I'm going to ask Alan to jump back up on the phone if he would, and kind of walk us through some of those case studies.
Thanks so much, Greg. So the first one that I want to talk about is the Virginia Department of Social Services. And as Greg mentioned, and I mentioned earlier, the D365 solutions are the ones that are these SaaS, software as a service type of Azure service. And so these are dealing more with, prior when I talked about McHenry County, I was talking about an ERP solution, and I described the components of that. In these examples, this is more of a customer service or a citizen service, often represented by a case management solution. So the creation of a case, usually prompted by a citizen, the actions taken to resolve that case, the workflow associated with the resolution and notifying people that it's been resolved, the publishing of the case back out maybe through a portal so that the interested parties can see the status, the eventual closing of the case. Those are the types of solutions that we're talking about here with the Virginia Department of Social Services, and the next example as well. Obviously, social services deals with children and various services to serve their interests. Our work for Virginia Department of Social Services was very much centered around citizen engagement solutions. So citizen engagement is, as it says, sometimes you'll hear that referred to as the 311 system as another example. But again, it's cases that are being created either by citizens or in the interest of citizens that need to be resolved, and the system helps the users of the system to resolve those cases and those systems. We can move on to the next one. So you can see staying in the state of Virginia here, Fairfax County, a very technology forward county in Virginia, doing a whole host of similar types of solutions, citizen request services. So again, that citizen request, creating a case and having it resolved, public health outbreak tracking and monitoring through the Department of Health, employee immunization tracking, partner outreach through the Office of Public and Private Partnership, and then audit case management and in the Department of Taxation. So you can see the variation of types of cases that we're creating here through what has historically been called a CRM system. And so D365 incorporates both CRM as the case management solution, as well as ERP for the types of projects that I described earlier with McHenry County. I think that's probably all I need to speak to on that. I think Greg was going to give you a little bit more case studies in the Azure space.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alan. So a couple of case studies to point out. These are from Microsoft, so they're not necessarily AKA case studies, although we have engaged in similar types of activities with other state and local government customers. But just to give you some flavor of what others are doing in the cloud, specifically Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles. The city was looking for a way to empower their citizens to make neighborhoods and public spaces cleaner, to monitor how their city operates in terms of waste processing and efficiency, and really turned to Microsoft and Microsoft's cloud solutions to help them kind of design something that would help alleviate these kinds of pain points. So as part of an effort to improve the services for the residents, LA created a My LA 311 system so that citizens could easily initiate service requests, service tickets on their own to report cleanup issues. LA used cloud-based technologies to including things like mobility, mapping, tracking, dashboards for the citizens to actually be able to not only file these requests, but also see where is the request at? Was it fulfilled? Has it been assigned? What was the cleanup time? What was the resolution? And help the citizens in LA really feel like they're part of the community and helping to drive out cleaning their neighborhood up and helping to reduce that type of waste. And then another good use case is specifically right here for the state of Indiana. State of Indiana wanted to provide secure online access to services such as their business licensing or tax payments and even unemployment benefits for all of their 6 million plus citizens. The solution that they used was Microsoft Azure Active Directory for business to consumer identity management for its Indiana business portal. You can actually go to inbiz.com for the portal and go take a look at it. But the state is providing sort of a one-stop shop resource for expanding their business services to the population, leveraging this identity management solution. The real benefit for it is because it's Microsoft cloud-based identity management, Indiana can now expand and enhance all of these services without really thinking about how do they tie in credentials for end users and ensure that the identities match the individual that they say that they are. So with that, one of the next things that we wanted to talk about a little bit was just sort of next steps. How can you engage and get thinking about the cloud? What makes the most sense for you and your agency? What is the right next step? You know, certainly some customers and some agencies believe it's an all-in proposition, and if we don't do all of it right now, then it's not going to work, or worse, we have to go all in, and it's sort of one of those types of decisions. But that's not necessarily true. And we've spent a lot of time in situations where we're envisioning new applications to solving agency-related business problems or customer or consumer-related problems, looking at your voter base and trying to figure out what makes the most sense. Not everything has to be an all or nothing proposition, and that's why AKA has a specific offering that we call our ground to cloud roadmap. With this roadmap, it really means that we will go in and spend time with you and help you figure out what makes the most sense for you. Certainly, we will offer an assessment. We can assess your infrastructure and applications as they exist in your current format and your current implementation with inside your data centers, help you understand what that looks like up in the cloud. But we'll also help you understand sort of what are your options and what would be alternatives to Microsoft. Now, I think you'll find quite quickly that Microsoft will end up being the most cost-effective and secure cloud that you can go to. But if you want that extra comfort point that you're making the right decision, we can help you understand what those costs look like in other scenarios. We'll also help you with what the right size actually needs to be. In other words, when you move into the cloud, you do things differently. You don't need to have systems that are designed at 5 times the capacity because of the just in case scenarios. You can actually design your infrastructure to meet the exact needs of your base workload and size up and size down as you need. And we'll help you understand what all of that looks like. We'll also help you come up with a plan, a migration strategy, a cost, a timeline, and what makes the most sense for you. It may be that your move to the cloud is over a 3 or 5 year journey. It may be that it's over a 3 to 5 month journey. Really comes down to what makes the most sense for you and your agency. And AKA can help you do that. On the screen, you sort of see that simple, medium, and complex with rough idea of how much time it looks like and how many different individual workshops we would need to be able to help you assess this. But you end up with a concrete roadmap, concrete pricing, and a concrete timing for how to move into the cloud. So that's something that we would really like you to take advantage of and have a thought about how can you move into the cloud. So with that, I'm going to open the floor over to Petra so that she can take any questions or help us produce any answers for you for any of the content that we just went through. And I hope you enjoyed the presentation.
Great. Thank you so much, Greg. And thank you, Alan. As a reminder, you can submit any questions you have using the panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We did have a couple come through during the presentation, so we'll start with those now. Let's see. What geographic regions does AKA cover specifically?
Sure, Petra, would you like me to address that, or would you like Alan to talk through that?
Alan, why don't you answer that one?
Sure. So yeah, in our government practice, we address opportunities throughout the United States. There's no limitation or restriction. We have clients in many areas of the country. I think the bigger question when it comes to governments is the procurement process. We're not on every state or local contract, and so depending on what the procurement process is like, it can sometimes become a little bit more complicated. We do have a GSA and other contracts in place, but yeah, that's usually. But at the same time, we've been very flexible in working with municipalities to allow them to procure in a way that's comfortable for them, whether that's in conjunction with Microsoft or even another local partner that we may have a relationship with, or that the municipality may have a relationship with. So there's no restrictions around where we might engage with governments.
Great. Thank you, Alan. We also have, what is the range of pricing for the ground to cloud roadmap offering?
Oh, that's a great question. I apologize for not addressing that as we were going through the presentation. These ground to cloud roadmap activities are not intended to be extremely expensive. They're really done in a very collaborative fashion with the agency. Really, it's more from us, from AKA's guidance and evangelism, and trying to help you understand what makes the most sense. So I've seen the small version of the roadmap activity with those limited scope of services anywhere in the $5,000 to $10,000 range. Whereas if you go to the complex for agencies that are looking for full data center closure and migrating full workloads into the cloud, some of those types of roadmap activities can get quite a bit up there. And when I say quite a bit up there, I mean in the $25,000 to $30,000 range. So I would say this type of strategy roadmap, where we really spend time with you, it really comes down to how much scope you want us to go through and cover. But I would say on the low end, maybe $5,000 US. To the highest end, I haven't seen one go out for more than $30K. But we can help figure that out fairly quickly and make the right price and the right decision for what you need, and be collaborative in that process.
Great. Thank you, Greg. Just give another minute for any additional questions. Again, you can use the panel on the right-hand side of your screen. You can just type it right in there. Okay. Well, it looks like that concludes the questions and thus the presentation today. Thank you so much to Greg and Alan for presenting. And thank you everyone for joining us on the line for today's webinar, How to Move Your State and Local Government from Ground to Cloud. You'll be receiving a follow-up email with a link to the recording, including the video, in the next few business days. If you have any other questions, please contact Greg, ginks@akaes.com, or myself, Petra Imiller, pimiller@akaes.com, right there on the screen. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.